Okay, good vach. I want to share with you a story about the Alter Rebbe's son, Rabbi Moshe. There is a lot written about Rabbi Moshe, and unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation about the Alter Rebbe's son. So much so, not just now, but this misinformation has been going on for a long time. So much so that the Alter Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, told a friend of mine's grandfather in a private audience. He said to him that he wrote a book to say the true story of Rabbi Moshe, the Alter Rebbe's son, but unfortunately there was a fire and the book got burnt. And he doesn't have the power, doesn't have the strength to rewrite the book. But the reason he wrote this book was in order to say the true story, because unfortunately there's a lot of misinformation. Even the last couple of decades, many books have come out about Rabbi Moshe, which have a lot of misinformation. But Baruch Hashem, fortunately, there is, from the previous Rebbe's writings that have been scattered in different places, we actually have the full story of Rabbi Moshe. Not only do we have the full story from the previous Rebbe's writings, but more recently, there have been discovered documents about Rabbi Moshe's imprisonment, as we'll get to later on, which prove the authenticity of the real story of Rabbi Moshe, not the story that's been going around, unfortunately, for a long time. I'm not going to go into the misinformation. I want to say this way the story is really from the previous Rebbe, but just to give you some insight of who we're talking about. It is our custom every day to recite the daily Tanya, and part of the recitation of the study of the daily Tanya is to learn the introduction to the Tanya. And in the introduction to the Tanya, we quote the haskames, the approbation of the Alter Rebbe's children. And we always mention Rabbi Moshe, the Alter Rebbe's son. And in the same is also for the text of the Tanya was also with the instruction of the Alter Rebbe's son. Many discourses of the Alter Rebbe's teachings we have only because of Rabbi Moshe. There are many accounts of his greatness and righteousness, and a very authoritative discussion, account of Rabbi Moshe was written by Rabbi Elia Matasov, a 318-page book, which really helped me a lot to prepare tonight's story. So with no further ado, actually one more thing I want to share was that Rabbi Zalman Garariel Shalom, he once was speaking to, I think, of the previous Rebbe, and he said that he had heard that Rabbi Moshe did tshuva at the end of his life. And the previous Rebbe said there was nothing to do tshuva for. So, as we'll see, there is a reason why this misinformation started, and this mistake started. But the truth is that it's just a mistake, and the real story is, as I shall share. Okay, so in the time of the Alter Rebbe, as famous, there was a lot of opposition to the Alter Rebbe. And not just to the Alter Rebbe, but also to the Alter Rebbe's colleagues, the other tzaddikim, other students of the Mizitcha Maggid. And they were looking for something to do to protect themselves. We're not talking about just, financial issues. There were actually many accounts, many stories of chassidim who were beaten and hurt and worse. And even the related to Berditchev famously had to escape with his family from the city of Pinsk because of the tremendous harassment that he had and his family had. So the students of the Maggid, the colleagues of the Alter Rebbe, decided that they were going to make a cherem, an excommunication on the Vilna Gaon. And somehow they felt that this would protect them. I'm not sure exactly why they thought that would help them. And they wanted to make a real cherem, a real excommunication according to Kabbalah, as opposed to the excommunication that was made by the detractors against Chassidim, which was just made according to Nigla, according to the exoteric parts of the Torah. They wanted to make a real cherem against the Vilna Gaon, and somehow they thought that this would help them, help the war they were experiencing. What is a real cherem? So a real cherem means that they would have 72 people join a court, and they would fast for 40 days. Each day they would recite the special prayer of Tikkun Chatzos, the prayer where tzaddikim stay up at night and they mourn for the destruction of the Bais Hamikdash. They would get up on the last day, 2 hours before sunrise. They would blow the shofar, Tkiya Shvarim Kruat Tkiya, and then they would pray, and they would recite the cherem, recite the excommunication, daven mincha, and have bread and water. That was their plan. And they made her they somehow, don't ask me how to do this, we're talking about tzaddikim, somehow they made a request in heaven, and the response that they got was, that in order for this cherem to work, there has to be at least one member of the court that has the same caliber, the same knowledge as the Vilna Gaon. And if not, it won't work. So they sent emissaries to visit the Alter Rebbe because they knew the Alter Rebbe was so knowledgeable in Torah, and therefore he would fit the criteria that was needed for this cherem. So the great tzaddik of Shlomo Karliner, he visited the city of Liozna together, according to one account, with the Shal Polotsker, another account according to Baruch Mezhebusher. But clearly it was Shlomo Karliner who went to visit the Alter Rebbe, as the previous Rebbe writes. And the Alter Rebbe had made a takana, made a rule that people, because of everyone wanted to visit the Alter Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe had to make many rules about when they could visit, when they couldn't visit. They could only visit on the shabbos that blesses a new month. And so there were a lot of people. It was a hot day. It was Tuesday in Parshas Shlach. It was shortly before that. That's when they made their decision of making this excommunication. And they arrive on Tuesday, and they are looking for, the way they refer to him, as Zalman the Litvak. The Alter Rebbe was called Zalman from Lithuania because that's where he was from, and he was known affectionately by that title among the colleagues of the Alter Rebbe, the students of the Mzitcha Magid. Of course, none of the Chassidim, none of the followers of the Alter Rebbe would refer to him by that title. And they came, and some of the older Chassidim knew who they meant. It was a hot day, as people were learning outside, and so they saw this wagon show up, and they directed them to come to the house of the Alter Rebbe. Outside the Alter Rebbe's room, the Mittler Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe's son, was studying with his chavrusa, with his study partner, who later became a Rebbe of his own right, Rebbe Ernst Tescheller. And they were studying Torah together, and they walked in. They asked, "Where is the Zalman Litvak?" And they pointed to the Mittler Rebbe smiled and pointed to the room of the Alter Rebbe. And he started to hear, and the Alter Rebbe came out, and the Alter Rebbe kissed Rabbi Shlomo Karliner with great love. And they didn't know who this was, Rabbi Shlomo Karliner. All they knew was that his face had this awesome expression, it just was a frightening expression of a very holy person. And they wanted to know what was being said, and they tried to hear. They didn't have to try too hard because there was very loud voices in the room. And finally, the Alter Rebbe comes out of the room with the Shlomo Karliner, with the other guests as well, according to various accounts, if the other guest actually came out of the wagon or not. But the Alter Rebbe comes out, and the Alter Rebbe said, the Shlomo Karliner said to the Alter Rebbe, No, do you agree or do you not agree? Now, the Alter Rebbe was against making this excommunication. The reason he was against this was because he said that in 3 times in history, this excommunication, a similar Kabbalistic excommunication was made. It was made against Yerav ben Nevat, it was made against Elisha ben Avuya, and it was made against the student of Yeshua ben Prachia, Yeshu, JC. And the Alter Rebbe said that when a real excommunication is made against a person, what happens is that their soul gets cut off from Hashem, and that causes them to deny Hashem, that causes them to become a heretic and to convert to another religion, as happened. And so Yerav ben Nevat and Elisha ben Avuya and Yeshu all experienced this because there was a real excommunication against them. So the Alter Rebbe said that if such a excommunication is made against the Vilna Gaon, that will cause Vilna Gaon, chas v'shalom, to convert to a different other religion, and that will cause such a desecration to God's name, and he cannot agree to desecrate God's name. That was the Alter Rebbe's. He said, I'm not going to, I can't participate with, and I don't want to argue with my colleagues, he said, but I can't participate in this. And Rav Shlomo Karliner, he spoke very sharp words to the Alter Rebbe. And he said to the Alter Rebbe, you're worried about God's name being desecrated by something happening by the Vilna Gaon converting to another religion. What would happen to you? How would you feel if this desecration of God's name came out of your family? And he pointed at that moment to the Alter Rebbe's son, Rabbi Moshe. The Mittler Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe's older son, Rabbi Moshe at that time was 3 years old. He was running around, and the Alter Rebbe actually before Shem Kaliner said this, the Alter Rebbe held Rabbi Moshe came to hug the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter put his hand on his head, but when Rabbi Shem Kaliner said, "What would you do? How would you feel if that desecration of God's name came out of your family?" Which wasn't just a what would you do? It was sort of like the opposite of a blessing. He was saying, this should happen to you. You're against us. You're not going to be with us. Now, it's not obviously for people of our caliber to judge the words of tzaddikim and what motivated Rav Shlomo Karliner and what was he thinking when he said that. But the Alter Rebbe responded to Rav Shlomo Karliner, and he said as follows: Keil Elokim Tzvois, Hashem, the Lord of hosts. Keil Elokim Havayis Tzvois, Hashem, the God of hosts, knows the sincerity of my heart. In front of him, said the Alter Rebbe, all the tears of my eyes are held, that I cried in front of our Rebbe, meaning the Mezitcha Maggid, his predecessor, and I asked the Mezitcha Maggid, and I cried to him, why is it that I need to be the one to basically lead the Jewish people and to stand up among all of the great Torah giants and to give his opinion? And he didn't, in other words, Alter Rebbe saying, I didn't want to be this person, to be this great leader, but Hashem knows how much I've cried that I didn't want to do this, and yet I have to do this. And he said that my Rebbe, the Mezitcha Maggid, my predecessor, blessed me and promised me, and I trust in God. And he said, God will not listen. In other words, when Shem Kaliner is saying this shall happen to your family, the Alter Rebbe said, God will not listen. Lo yishma Hashem. V'la Hashem ha-Yeshua, and salvation comes from God. So, Rabbi Moshe, he was then 3 years old, as a child, he went back to the other Chassidim who were interested to know what had happened, and he ran around the bima, and he saw the other Chassidim, and he told them, they're asking my father to do something, my father says not allowed, my father says not allowed, he kept repeating, my father says it's not allowed. Meanwhile, the Alter Rebbe's successor, who was then much younger, the Mittler Rebbe, his other son, fainted. And he fainted because of what he had heard, and also, as the previous Rebbe writes in one place, he thought that the curse that Rav Shlomo Karliner had given was to him. So, and he didn't really know exactly what Rav Shlomo Karliner was why he had come. He didn't know what it was about, but he knew it was something very, very serious. And when the Alter Rebbe visited his son, he begged him to please tell him what's going on because it bothers him. That's why he got sick for weeks because of what he had heard. And he asked the Alter Rebbe to share with him what was going on. The Alter Rebbe told him exactly what had happened. And the Mittler Rebbe, Baruch Hashem, not for weeks, for months, he was sick. And then he recovered, Baruch Hashem. So the Alter Rebbe's son, Moshe, he was very, very gifted in many ways, not just gifted as a tzaddik, as the previous year calls him HaRav, HaKadosh, the holy rabbi, Rabbi Moshe. Besides his holiness, he was also gifted intellectually. He had wanted, when his father was arrested, he wanted to participate in the effort to free his father, because he was gifted not just intellectually, but also he was a great orator. And he wanted to be able to speak in defense of his father, sort of as a lawyer. But the Alter Rebbe didn't want anyone to come by his first arrest. However, by the Alter Rebbe's second arrest, the Alter Rebbe was allowed to bring him. At that time, the arrest wasn't that severe. The Alter Rebbe was allowed to bring two people with him. And he took with him Rabbi Moshe and someone else. And the Alter Rebbe said about his son, Rabbi Moshe, who was named after the Alter Rebbe's grandfather, Rabbi Moshe Apozin. The Alter Rebbe said that Rabbi Moshe, his son, has his intellectual capacity is 10 times as great as the one he's named after. And the Rabbi Moshe, with his gift of he was able to arrange many things to help his father, and one of them was a minyan. The Alter Rebbe, he told the ministers that were taking care of the Alter Rebbe's arrest. One of the ministers, he said to them that my father prays every single day, 3 times a day with a quorum, with a minyan. Can you arrange that? He said, I can't arrange that because he's not allowed to be around other Jews. Can he be in another room and there be a crack in the wall? And he agreed to that. So because Rabbi Moshe Alter Rebbe actually was able to pray with a minyan while he was in prison. So there were many different hearings, over 20 hearings, during the Alter Rebbe's second imprisonment. And the discussion involved the time of the Jewish court in Israel, the Sanhedrin, the history of Kabbalah, and everyone was really impressed by the Alter Rebbe's son Moshe. First of all, externally, just the way he looked, the way he presented himself, and his language. The Alter Rebbe spoke in Yiddish, and he translated into Russian and also into French. And they were so impressed by his Russian and his French and the way he presented himself. And they tried to engage the Alter Rebbe. There were 2 priests that were part of the hearings. And these 2 priests tried to engage the Alter Rebbe in discussion about religion. Their intent was that the Alter Rebbe should speak sacrilegiously about their religion. But the Alter Rebbe responded, I did not come here to argue about religion. He refused to enter a debate with them. But when the Alter Rebbe would speak, Moshe would explain all that his father had said. And the Alter Rebbe really appreciated. He said that the way his son explained things, but he criticized something about, on his level, on Moshe's level, something about his being self-aware of his genius. Of course, that's something on his level of his greatness, but as the Alter Rebbe expected of him, not arrogance in the simple sense. Either way, the 2 priests they engaged a discussion with Rabbi Moshe after the Alter Rebbe would have the hearing. After it was over, these 2 priests would talk with Rabbi Moshe. And Rabbi Moshe was really very knowledgeable about Christianity and other religions. About 10 miles away from Lyazhne, there was a priest who spoke publicly in the town square, and he became very knowledgeable, not by listening to his speeches only, but that's how he became interested in learning about other religions. And the Torah says that certain people are allowed to study other religions in order to be able to answer questions and to defend our faith. So he loved to debate with others of other faiths and to defend the faith of the Jewish people. So they saw that Rabbi Moshe was really knowledgeable about their faith, and he had a very amazing understanding of their faith. And there was two priests. The older priest invited Rabbi Moshe to a debate about their religion, and he, of course, was victorious in the debate. This wasn't something that the Alter Rebbe knew about, and eventually, Baruch Hashem, through Rabbi Moshe's efforts and others, and with the bracha of Hashem, of course, and the Alter Rebbe was freed from prison on the third day of Hanukkah, on the 27th day of Kislev. The king Pavel, he allowed the Alter Rebbe to be freed. However, he wanted the Alter Rebbe to stay in the capital city at the time, and he wanted him to be there closer to him. And for 5 months, the Alter Rebbe stayed there together with Rabbi Moshe. And Rabbi Moshe would visit the homes of various noblemen at the time. He would go to their libraries and to learn. And there was one nobleman whose name was Arkady Zubov. Arkady Zubov had invited one of the top representatives of the government of Austria to his home, and invited Rabbi Moshe to his home. And Rabbi Moshe gave a dissertation about the difference between the Jesuits and other Christian priests, and he described the cruelty of the Jesuits and versus the other Christian priests, and it really did not strike a chord with this Arkady Zubov really didn't like it. Although it was clear that what he was saying was true, and no one had anything to say. They couldn't language of the previous Rebbe, they couldn't find their hands and feet because of the brilliance of his arguments. And they invited him again, and he spoke about the whole concept of religion and faith from the time of Avram Avinu. He gave a historical description of all religions and all faiths from the time of Abraham. And he explained how all other religions they're very flimsy, and he proved it historically, and the basis of all the religions, and how the only religion that has any authenticity is religion of Moshe and Rabbeinu and the Torah. So they were really, really excited. I mean, they were really amazed by it, but they were also insulted. And he didn't hold himself back from criticizing what was holy to them. And they asked him, how can you say such things? And he said that if there are 1,000 people who could see, they certainly could add with their vision to one person who can see. But if there's one person who's blind, 1,000 blind people cannot add any information to the one person who's blind. In other words, what he's saying is true. So there was a chassid whose name was Mordechai Lepler, and the discussion that Rabbi Moshe gave was a difference between Christians and Catholics, and Arkady Zubov told Mordechai Lepler how he was concerned about what he was saying and how it bothered him. And Mordechai realized this wasn't healthy, this wasn't a good thing. And he's told Rabbi Moshe, this isn't good. He didn't have any effect on Rabbi Moshe. So he told the Alter Rebbe what had happened. The Alter Rebbe said that all that my son Moshe has said is true, but I feel bad about the consequences. What he said was true, but I feel bad about the consequences. So this eventually, I'm not sure I understood this, but if I understood it correctly, the Mittler Rebbe, who started the Mittler Rebbe had many Hasidim and others receive land from the government to farm the land. It was in various colonies. And he was summoned to the King Alexander I. Together with the Mittler Rebbe came his brother Rabbi Moshe. And Rabbi Moshe realized that the king wasn't giving the proper respect to the Mittler Rebbe. They who knew so much and knew so many languages, and the other priest who was invited to this meeting was given so much more honor, and he realized that he has to set the record straight. And somehow he didn't. The Mittler Rebbe rebuked him because he said, the wise men must be careful in their words. And the Mittler Rebbe rebuked him because apparently he wasn't holding himself back in his criticism. So somehow, as a result of this discussion, there was another debate. And this debate was in the city of Yartsev, and it took more than a full year. It was started there and it was in other places. And the bishop of the city of Mazi was very upset at the way this debate was going, because it was clear that Rabbi Moshe was winning every step of the way of the debate. And he and the other priests who were part of the debate, they thought of a plan, and the plan was like this. The deal was that anyone who wins the debate must agree to convert to the religion who wins the debate. So they swore on a cross that Rabbi Moshe lost the debate, and therefore he must convert. So I'm not sure exactly what stage of this debate, at what stage this happened, but at some point, Rabbi Moshe came with a horse and wagon. I think the previous Rebbe said with 3 horses, to the Alter Rebbe. When the government investigated, by the way, and they asked the Alter Rebbe's family if they know where Rabbi Moshe was, they didn't know, because for obvious reasons, Rabbi Moshe didn't want to tell them, so that if they get interrogated, they wouldn't know. But he visited the Alter Rebbe, and the Alter Rebbe said, "Why are you so certain about what you're doing? Are you trusting in me?" The Alter Rebbe said, "If you're trusting in me," he said, "you won't even know the way to the door, my door in Gan Eden, my door in heaven." Obviously, this is something that's it's beyond us. Talking about tzaddikim, within tzaddikim, but you'll see the end of his sentence. You'll get a flavor of who is speaking to who he is speaking. The Alter Rebbe said, "This is what, however, what I could tell you. You should kiss my tzitzis, and you should engrave the picture of my tzitzis in your mind." Which, by the way, a similar thing happened both to the Rebbe Cashapp and to the previous Rebbe, who were also dealing with anti-Semites in their time. And in each story of the Rabbi Moshe and the Rebbe Cashapp and the previous Rebbe, their predecessor told them to kiss their tzitzis. In the other stories about the previous Rebbe and the Rebbe Cashapp, the word Rebbe Cashapp said was, tzitzis brings a transcendent light of Hashem, and the transcendent light of Hashem can cause the eyes of the unholy to be blinded. So, getting back to the story, the Alter Rebbe told Rabbi Moshe that he should kiss his tzitzis and engrave his tzitzis in his mind, and then he said, with this, you will be able to jump from a roof. That's what the Alter Rebbe said. Anyways, the debate finished, and they made this oath that on their cross that he had lost the debate, and they arrested Rabbi Moshe. And miraculously, on the 4th day of his arrest, which was the same day that his father was freed from prison the first time, the 19th of Kislev, Rabbi Moshe, miraculously, everyone who had arrested him fell asleep, And Moshe jumped from a roof, from the window, and was able to escape. But it wasn't a very pleasant rest of the story. He had to continuously, first of all, that moment itself, he had to run. He ran, the previous Rebbe writes, he ran almost for 24 hours straight. He himself wondered how he was physically able to run that amount of time. You know, where he was running and how he was running. But he ran away and he escaped them. And he had to go from village to village, and because and his family went to Israel, and he had to he endured a lot of hardship in his because he was a wanted man, because of what the government suspected of him, of insulting their religion, etc. So interesting custom that he had. He would collect tzedakah, but he only collect enough tzedakah to buy food, and then he wouldn't collect any more. He collected, I think, twice a week. He would collect tzedakah. He would sleep in the shul. He would tie, I think, his feet. Strange things that for on the level of tzaddikim, strange kinds of sigufim, of self-infliction. When time came when he was going to pass away, there was actually he lived a long life. He lived at the time of the Rebbe Marash, the fourth Rebbe of Chabad, and there was a chassid of Chaikin who wrote to the Rebbe Marash about Moshe, and how when Moshe was about to pass away, the Chevra Kadisha, the burial society, asked him to tell him who his family is. He says, "Don't worry about my family; they'll know. What should we write on your tombstone?" So he wrote, Moshe ben Hagoyin of Shnei. So that's all, Shnei. That's how they knew who he was. But the whole time he was in this, he was a hidden tzaddik, and no one knew who he was and where he came from. And that is a good portion of the story. Of course, if you want to learn a lot more, there's a lot more in this excellent book by Rabbi Matasov. And that's all for tonight. Shagutta vach, gutta b'suris, and l'chaim.
Amen. L'chaim. Shvuah tov.
Shvuah tov.